Protect all the things. Protect them.
Protect the stuff.
Alright folks, welcome back to another installment of Kick the Bucket. We're going to explain to you in this episode how to basically set up protected regions and get an area set up for your command blocks like we have here below me. And I've got Ponguino with me again, and we have our friend here, the Spawn Guard. We'll explain why the Spawn Guard is such a fun little utility here. So just to start off, a little brief sort of recap of what we explained in the first one. So our first episode, we talked about basically optimization of all the command blocks, and if you gathered everything that we put down in that episode, really the purpose was that we wanted to describe to you how to prevent the command blocks from lagging. And we've done as much as we can, but eventually you're probably going to notice some sort of server client-side lag from them, depending on how robust your little mini games and other features you want to add with the command blocks. The more you add, eventually you're going to start to notice some lag. So what we wanted to address in this episode was a way to relocate your spawn chunks and move all the command blocks, because command blocks basically have to be set up in the spawn chunks so that they're always running and can always apply to the players. So we want to set up the command blocks in the spawn chunks, and we want to keep those basically away from the players. So we're going to move the spawn chunks like we've done on our server here. This is Minecraft World's presets. We've moved them off to a remote location where players will be unlikely to interact with them. We've also protected the region, and we're going to prevent players from coming near it, because this is basically an admin area only. And then we're going to create an actual spawn where we want new players to be sent to. We'll be setting their initial home point there, and then beyond that, the home point's up to them. So with all that said, let's dive into how we do this, and I'm going to kick most of this over to Pang and let him explain the stuff, because he knows it way, way, way more than I do.
Okay, so I guess the first thing to mention is this does take a little more effort than just a few commands. I did, for part of the protection, use MC-Edit to change the area that the spawn chunks are in to mushroom biome so that no monsters spawn in it. So there's plenty of tutorials out there how to do that, so
yeah.
You guys can look that up. But
if you didn't want to go that far as editing a biome to a mushroom biome, there are ways to do mob protection. We'll probably have maybe some side videos that explain other options you can do, but we feel that's the best because it's a one-time thing. You change the biome to a mushroom biome. You can actually see, I mean, obviously we're not in a mushroom biome right here, but when I pull up my F3 screen, the biome is Mushroom Island. So, and since no hostile mobs spawn there, and no, I believe, do friendly mobs spawn?
Mushrooms will spawn if you put mycelium or whatever that's called down, but if you don't have any of that, then nothing will spawn.
Yeah, and obviously we have none of that here.
Okay, so I guess the first step would be, okay, so most of the time you want to have your spawn where people actually come there near 0, but in my case, that's where I want people to start playing from, but I don't want my spawn chunks to be there, so I moved my spawn chunks to about 20k if you want to throw open the F3.
Yep.
And the way you do that is sets...
It's set world spawn?
Yeah, set world spawn.
Right.
And I believe you can set it by putting the coordinates in there, or you could just stand wherever you want it to be and set it. Once you reset it, you'll notice the compass will point to that area, and then if anyone new joins the server, it'll be right near where you set it. And you did your video about how to find the spawn chunks and how to determine the borders and everything from there.
Yep.
But you can keep moving that around, and they will keep changing. So I set it up around here, and then I made a border and marked out every chunk. You can see all the squares for all the different chunks. And this is where I'm going to be having my command blocks and the clocks that run and the redstone and all that good stuff. You can see I don't have a whole lot set up yet, but there's plenty of room. And up here, this glass panel is, I just put a panel up here kind of far away, where this is the region where a player will basically spawn when they enter the game for the first time. So there's going to be a couple parts to this. The first part's going to be once someone enters the game, I'm going to want to TP them away from here, because this is not ideal playing area, because all they can do here is just fall to their death. So that's why we brought in Mr. Spawn Guard here. He's going to be helping us out on getting some players out of here. The other thing is, once you've got the mushroom biome, that protects it from mobs, but there's other protection things that need to happen. So, like, if a player is in a town of some sort, you don't want them to be able to grief your town. It's nice if everyone's honest and they know they're not supposed to do that, but if you've been on a server before, you'll know that there's going to be someone that's going to just want to blow up stuff, so got to make sure it's not possible, because they will find a way if there is a way. So I will show you how to do that using not too many command blocks, and you can do it in any shape you want.
Okay, so this is basically what we've got set up to handle first-time players, correct?
Yeah, it's just this row. I think it's like 5 blocks.
Okay.
All right, so you got the clock running. We all sort of know that. All right, the first block here, all that does is make sure that everyone's score is set to 0 if they don't have a score set. The thing about scoreboards is there's really no way, as far as I can tell, to detect a player's score if it has never been set before. So you can't detect if it's null or undefined or whatever you want to call it. So all the first block does is make sure everyone scores 0 by adding 0 to it. That's my little trick for a multiplayer setting, is no matter what, if someone enters the game and they don't have a score set yet, it will put it on 0. The next one will check if their score is 0 and put them in the team PvP. I've set up a PvP team and a no PvP team, and I'll explain that in a few minutes, but all this one does is if someone joins for the first time, it drops them into that team.
Okay.
The next one sets their spawn point. So basically, when they die, where they're going to respawn, we don't want it, if they die, to respawn here. We want it to be in our spawn we set up. So that's what that does. It sets their spawn point.
So these are X, Y, and Z coordinates, and then something like basically their facing direction, right? So
yeah,
this should be
their pitch and yaw, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's what I got set up. Then I have a TP command. In my case, I have an orientation that I want to send them to. So before they get to go to spawn and start playing the game, I put them through a little bit of a questionnaire and rules and things like that. So here's the TP. So anyone that's got that score of 0, it will TP them. And then give them some bread. Got to give them some starter food. Can't expect them to survive without a little food, right?
I didn't know you do that. That's nice.
Yeah. So anyway, and then after that's all done, it will set their first time visitor to 1, because now it's done all these commands. It's run through these one time, and now they're not a first time visitor anymore.
And just to point something out, and correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of client-side lag. So this clock is set up right here, and it's basically all the rest of the commands are pointed off in the positive X direction. Mm-hmm. And within a game tick, since all of these blocks are being replaced, it's basically going to process this in the X direction. So it starts here and then moves to the end, processing all those commands in sequence. So that's basically how we know that this one happens first, this one happens second, and so on and so on. And this is sort of applied throughout the command block clocks, correct?
Correct. So, basically, in a lot of the machines you'll see me make is the first one kind of flips the switch. Oh, change the scoreboard to 1 or to 0 for somebody, and then do this stuff, and then change it back. So it's sort of like processing, like the on-off each. So it runs all the commands I want it to run on somebody in one tick. So, for the most part, these commands don't get run. Just every once in a while they get run. But for the rest of the remainder of the game, they're basically dormant, or they don't really execute anything. They just sort of fail most of the time. And that's pretty efficient as far as server and and client-side, performance.
Yeah. And again, that's going to be sort of a theme that runs throughout a lot of these things. We found that that's probably the best way to handle these situations is to take advantage of the scoreboard and basically set variables for specific players on specific conditions, and then we can do a sequence of commands within a single game tick, like Peng said. So you're going to see that a lot. So if you're not familiar with the scoreboard command, go ahead and look that stuff up. I'm gonna try to put up perhaps a video that maybe briefly goes over the scoreboard stuff, but there's plenty of resources out there. So
Yeah, we might do some how-tos on each command. So now that we've gotten the players out of here, they should only be in this area for a tick, which in most cases they won't even see what this looks like. For them it'll just look like they instantly loaded in orientation, which is sort of the effect we're looking for. But, obviously one of the other things I wanted to do was make sure that, no one could really come back here. I have protected it, but it's kind of like not ideal for them to come back. So I did run this next row. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it's basically executing commands from our little spawn guard guy up there, and he's checking if anyone is within a radius of like 300 or 400 from himself. He's going to say, hey, you're too close. He'll give him a warning and say, hey, you're too close to this admin area, turn back, please. And then if they get too close, then he just teleports them to the spawn. And that's just what these do here.
yeah,
If anyone's interested in seeing what those are, I mean, maybe if we do get a lot of interest, we can show more about that. But it's pretty reasonable.
Basically, a couple of these are sort of cosmetic things. One of them plays a sound. This one gives some text to the player, and then a few towards the end actually do the grunt work of it, of teleporting them away. Correct?
Yep, more or less.
Okay.
Let's go to the spawn. You got your book, right?
Yeah.
So, we've made regions mushroom biomes, so no mobs will spawn, which protects, from mobs. But one of the things I wanted to do was protect it from players. So, obviously, I can change their game mode from adventure to survival, which is, that's a good way of doing it, because in the survival you control what they can and can't do very well. But if they're on one side of the where you change their game mode, they could still like throw TNT, or there's lots of little clever things they can do to grief your spawn. So my solution was just make the spawn inside of barrier. So you'll see around this area, our spawn, we have these barriers, and then when you get down to kind of the ground level, you'll see the barrier turns into bedrock, and that basically goes all the way down to 0, and the barriers go all the way up to 255. So technically someone could jump over the wall, but I'll show you why that's not really going to help them in any way. This is more to just protect the area from them trying to grief it with a mob or with withers or what have you. And then I made a gate system where you can just go in and out of the town, so you can get through that little barrier through some teleporting pads, which we'll get into in other videos, but just to get the idea across what we're trying to do. So to change their game modes, let's show you how those command blocks work.
All right, so these are the command blocks responsible for controlling game mode?
They are indeed. So you'll see there's the enter protected area and the exit protected area. So like the other command blocks I do, there's the on-off switch. This is the on switch, and then this is like the off, and then it runs these commands in between. So basically, if you look at the first one here, it's doing an execute detect for people that are in the PvP team. PvP team is the team that's outside of a protected region, and I've made it so that team is red, and so you kind of get the idea, oh, this is like, you're not protected, you're red, and friendly fire is on, so you can hurt each other. It's sort of anarchy. So it detects that every player, if at 0, they have Sea Lantern at layer 0 and Barrier at layer 1. So if we want to just go down here, I'll show you what we're talking about. Okay. So you see there's a barrier, and then there's Sea Lantern, and then below that's the void.
Whoa! I fell through.
Okay, so obviously this is something you have to set up. But anyway, so those it's just checking at layers 1 and 0 for anybody if they're standing above that. So what it's going to do is if they're above an area that has those two blocks at the bottom, always at layer 0 and 1, it's going to set their enter protected toggle to 1. So it'll only set their enter toggle if they're in PvP, the team PvP. So the next command it's going to run is it's going to play a little sound for them. It's going to do a title. It's going to do a title. Then it's going to change your game mode to game mode 2. And then it's going to put your team to no PvP. So it's going to put you in another team called no PvP that I've set up. And that would be the green team. And friendly fire for that team is off. So when you're in a town, you can't like kill each other, which is good. You don't want people attacking each other in town. And then at the very end, it's going to change your enter protected to 0. So now you're in a different team. So if you go back to the beginning, you'll notice it won't run this, even though you're standing over you're standing over the barrier and the sea lanterns. This won't execute again because you changed the team, and it's based on if you're in the wrong team, it will run these commands. So no matter how they get into a protected area, if they ender pearl in, if they come in through another portal, if they fall in through the sky, as soon as they enter the region, if they're in the wrong team, it's going to switch them to the right team.
And I guess the interesting thing to point out there is the way that we've done this since we're using the execute detect and looking at block types, it really means that we can create a protected region simply by just placing those block types where we're detecting them at. And really the protected region can be sort of shapeless. It can be whatever shape you declare it.
Right. If you didn't want to I put a barrier around it so that, they can't throw TNT across it and stuff, but if you wanted to, you could not do that, and you basically just, if all you wanted to do is change their game mode based on a region, and the region is any shape they want to, you can totally do that. And it's pretty flexible, and you can use these same commands to protect every single protected area. Like in our server, we're planning to have multiple towns and stuff, which we'll get into later, but you could use this method to protect lots of different regions, lots of different shapes, just with this one little row of command blocks. So the opposite is if you exit, it checks for bedrock. So at layer 0, if you're going to be executing positive, so basically anywhere else in the world, in the overworld, you're going to be, if you're in the wrong team again, if you're in no PvP, like you're in the protected survival team or the adventure mode team, and then they detect bedrock underneath you, this means, we want to change them back to survival. So it goes through the, here's another effect, the sound, title, game mode to 0, back to survival, and then it puts them back in the PvP team where they can attack each other, and then it changes the sword order back. Alright, so you're outside, you're in adventure mode, or you're in survival mode.
Yep.
There you are. You can break stuff.
Yeah.
Go get some dirt. Some dirt.
Yep.
All right. Well, you've had a fun time playing survival. Now you'd like to go into town and wreck some face.
Okay, so I got the sound and the titles there, and it also changed my game mode. It said that my game mode had been updated, and lo and behold, I can't break anything. Now, why is that?
Well, it's set your game mode to adventure, and it's put you into a different group. So if anyone else is in here with you, you can't hurt them. So while you're in adventure mode, the rules are a little different. You can only break blocks that I allow you to break. You can't really mine or attack anything, or you can interact with certain things if I deem it fit. But for the most part, this is the best way to protect in vanilla a region.
Yeah, so like I can't place blocks, I can't break blocks, even these lily pads. So it's preventing me from doing most kind of griefing, so we can build these really nice, pretty buildings that Pang's been hard at work on. And there's no fear of players coming in and just outright destroying them. The only other thing I guess to consider, I'll let you explain this a little bit further. There are some things that players can interact with, things like redstone buttons and levers, and item frames. Is that correct? And
yes.
chests too, I think.
Yeah, there's a. I mean, if I throw the lever down, you can toggle that lever.
Yep. So these can be like used. I mean, if like you could think of it as like maybe you didn't want them to do that, but at the same time you could allow you could have these levers and buttons be triggers for special things within your spawn area.
I mean, if you don't want them to interact with it, I mean, you can throw some barriers around it.
Yeah. Now I can't do anything.
Yeah. So there's a button there or a lever, and you're like, oh no, I can't get it. But so there's stuff you can do, and it's sort of at the admin's prerogative, which is really what you want if you're running a server and you want to have control. You want to be able to control what's going on inside your protected area, and make it sure it doesn't. You don't log on one day and have missing bits, a bunch of holes, or so it's all done with just those few commands to change your game mode back and forth. And I chose to make a square region, but I mean, at this point, I can make it any region, any shape region I want to. And if I actually wanted to have mobs spawn, I could make mobs spawn, but you know, that can still get a little dangerous if you know, a creeper spawns, or if there's a mob that can actually, you know, alter the terrain.
Yeah. Like Enderman picking up blocks and taking them away.
But it adds some flexibility, and I think it's a really nice way to achieve that protective region with not having to do a whole lot with your command blocks.
Okay, so obviously these are the two things we just went over, and this is how we protect the regions, both having players enter and exit, controlling their game mode. I guess we kind of sidestepped the portal pads, but we're going to get into that in the next episode because there's a lot to discuss with the portal pads in terms of TPing players in and out of the protected regions. But we did want to cover that there is another way to approach protected regions. We've ultimately considered it to be an obsolete method. It's a little bit easier to understand, and we did try it originally. But like we said, we kind of felt it was obsolete because it ended up having one major drawback, that we would end up having to create like strings of command blocks for each new region that we created. So if we wanted another city that a player would come to and enter into adventure mode, we would have to do a complete new set of command blocks for it. Whereas this set of command blocks handles every city, so long as we place those barrier and sea lantern blocks at the bottom of the world. So what we used to do, I'm going to grab a command block and I'm going to just see if I can type it out, roughly speaking. So what we used to do is, let's say we were going to TP a player or maybe change their game mode. We'll do game mode. Game mode 2, let's say we're going to do game mode 2 to a particular player. We'll just say all players. What we would do is we were going to declare basically a region, and you can do that with the X, Y, and Z commands or selectors or whatever. So you can do X, some number, comma Y, some number, etc. And then the next set of numbers would be DX equals, and this would be a change in X. So you would define a region with it's like so distracting. So you define a region that way, and basically what you would always end up with is a cube. So you're kind of restricted to these large cubes for regions to protect. Sort of kind of takes away some of the creativity, I think. But then, I mean, that's only one minor thing that we ended up thinking that's not a great way to approach it. Once we discovered this ability to do the execute detect for specific block types and control what happens based off the scoreboard approach, we felt like we didn't have to have giant cubes. We didn't have to create new regions for, because basically since you're hard coding the actual coordinates into the command block, you'd have to hard code the coordinates every time for new regions. Whereas this is not dependent on where the region is. It's just looking for specific block types and whether or not players are over it. So we can make this any shape. Obviously, we've got some cubes here, but this is just sort of this one is legitimately a cube because of the spawn chunks. The other one, we had just already started a design that was a cube shape, and we've got some other regions coming up that are going to be a little more exciting in terms of their shape, but they utilize this approach.
One of the other benefits of having it set up this way is I actually I basically do detects for other stuff. So one of the things I wanted to do was make it so that in town people could not use an ender pearl.
Yeah.
And if you look at this block over here, it basically just checks if there's an entity with type throw and ender pearl, and it does the execute detect above those two layers, or it might just be do the barrier at layer 1, and if that is successful, it will just remove the ender pearl, like TP the ender pearl into the void. So basically, it makes it so that no one can use an ender pearl in my protected regions.
So obviously, you don't have to do this ender pearl thing. We kind of like it because it means that we're kind of controlling the possibility of players griefing. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think there would be also a way to do this with fired fire charges potentially. Is that true?
I think so, yes.
Because fire charges would be a great example of why we put up the barrier as an outside wall, because players could basically set up a dispenser on the outside of a protected region and fire fire charges into the region, potentially destroying blocks or griefing other players. So it'd be another thing that you could potentially, I think, teleport into the void and protect the region that way.
Yeah, I'll probably add flaming arrows and fire charges and stuff like that. But I mean, I know one of the things on the when I had a bucket server was I had some parkour and different things in my protected regions, and people just used ender pearls to cheat and get to the top of the parkour. So my solution was to get a bucket, mod or plugin that made it so that you could control where they could not use ender pearls, and voila, I have one command block that does that for me instead of having to rely on a third-party plugin that might never get updated or might have bugs or might even be written poorly. So I think that's a testament to like why doing vanilla with command blocks is such a benefit to having a bucket server.
Yeah. So I do want to make mention real quick, since we did gloss over a few of these command blocks. We did it kind of for a reason, because we saw this when I was entering and exiting the regions. You saw the titles and you heard the sounds and everything. For a number of these things, we just did this, like we said, they're like cosmetic choices. So we're playing a sound for the player. We're also showing them some titles, and this is JSON code, correct? Or is it just sort of the regular Minecraft syntax, all the crazy syntax?
Yeah, the text, the title is a regular command, but the text that goes in the title, there's a lot of cool generators that you can get to make it easy for you to make those titles.
Yeah.
The parts that's important is the first part where I'm just doing the title for the person that has my scoreboard set to 1, more or less.
Yeah. So these are just sort of fancy things we've thrown in to make the experience of going in and out of protected regions a little bit more enjoyable and give it more of that, I guess, kind of plug-in feel without having the actual plug-in. So it seems very appropriate, very professional.
Yep.
Okay, folks, so that'll about do it. That's how you go about setting up your spawn chunks so you can start building your command block creations with the fill clocks. And it's also how you set up a way to get your players to spawn in your spawn point, have that be away from the command blocks, just in case the command blocks get laggy if you start to get a little bit crazy with them. Again, the lag that is experienced through command blocks is proximity related. In other words, for the most part, the lag is only experienced if you're near the command blocks. This is the reason why we've moved the command or the spawn chunks to a different location. So hopefully you have a better understanding of how we've approached this, and maybe if you're familiar with the commands, I assume you can just go ahead and start implementing it yourself. If this series gets a little more attention and you guys want further explanation, more detailed explanation about specific things, by all means, make requests. Would be more than happy to make specific videos toward certain features that we're building if they were glossed over too much. But we're trying to jump through very quickly in this series to some of the features that we think that people are more interested in. And on that note, the next episode is going to be about addressing the issue of /home and how we replicate that. And I think that's going to be kind of exciting. So that'll do it, folks. Catch you later.